Hi, this is Bap Kennedy, and you're listening to John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Just looking back, as a young boy growing up in Belfast, what are your first recollections of music starting to play an important role in your life?
Well, when I was a kid in Belfast, country music was quite part of the scene. A lot of the older people liked Hank Williams and Jim Reeves, things like that. You would hear a lot of Jim Reeves on the radio. So that was always in the background, but I never really took much interest in it until much later. In fact, it was really punk rock music that got me interested in music.
Yeah, you were a bit of a punk rocker in those early days.
I was a very small punk rocker.
Yeah.
I was only about 15, really. I was just slightly too young for the punk rock thing. So by the time I got going, it was over, really.
Yeah.
But it got me started.
For sure. Can you pinpoint a universal quality among the artists and bands that were inspiring you to make your own music?
That's a good question. I suppose really it was music that when you're younger you want exciting music, and like punk rock and like rock and roll and things like that. And really the music that seems to have lasted is the best of country music and the best of rock and roll. And those things, as you get older and you get more, you understand the music more as as a songwriter and as a musician, you start to appreciate how good that stuff really is because it seems to be around forever.
Yeah.
So I think it took me I was really in my 20s before I discovered that Hank Williams really was the greatest songwriter.
Mm-hmm. Now, an early band of yours was a band called 10 Past 7. Was that where the punk rocker was that the punk rock phase of your career?
No, the punk rock band was called Sellout. And it's very there's many layers to that name, but nobody ever came to see us, so it didn't really sell out much, But 10 Past 7 was really the post-punk phase, which is the sort of between the new wave and that the early 80s, when music was a bit sort of everybody was trying to be futuristic, with keyboards, with synthesizers. So we were kind of in between sort of post-punk and a bit of sort of postmodern or whatever. I don't know what it's called. We had a big synthesizer.
Talk about Energy Orchard. Did you have a blueprint for the type of music or the sound that you wanted with that band?
Well, that band was really it came together from three other bands, one of which was 10 Past 7, and everybody in the band came from the same. Pretty much the same sort of square mile in Belfast, but we actually all met up in London, which is a strange place to, we all ended up going to London to find work and whatever,
Yeah.
But we all had there was probably 3 or 4 different really strong influences. Some people really like Thin Lizzy. We all really like Van Morrison. And one of the guys was really into his Irish traditional music. So we kind of, between all of us, we knew we kind of wanted to be an Irish sounding band because we were Irish, and we thought it would be a good idea to maybe carry the torch, and take Irish rock a little bit further, So we kind of had a plan of sorts, but the main plan was just to go out and have a good time, really, and that was more important than anything.
Sure. And there were other Irish bands emerging at that time, bands like Hot House Flowers and the Waterboys. Did you feel like you were a part of that wave?
Yeah, we were actually included. It was called, in the UK, it was called the Raggle Taggle wave. It was all the sort of Irishy bands with ponytails and waistcoats and, loud sort of Celtic-based music. Yeah. So we were part of that. Yeah, we were all definitely contemporaries of the Hot House Flowers and the Waterboys, people like that.
Yeah. How do you look back on those days in terms of your development as a songwriter?
Well, it definitely that was the period when I learned how to make records, really, because making a record's quite it's trickier than people think. It's very easy to make a bad record. So really, I made quite a few. I made 4 or 5 albums with Energy Orchard, and by the time we'd finished the time that was over, I'd been in a lot of studios and I'd been working with a lot of producers, and I'd sort of figured out the best way of making a record, and and that was by making a lot of mistakes.
That band had a very strong live reputation as a great live act, but it didn't transfer to huge record sales. Do you have a theory on why that happened?
Well, it's just, it really just depends on, every record company signs up 10 bands that sound like a successful band. And, when we were signed at the same time as Nirvana, and they were unknowns, and they were on the same label as us, they were on MCA, Geffen. And so obviously, well, Energy Orchard and Nirvana were both out trying to be famous. and I think it was Nirvana who actually won that competition.
Yeah. I read
so once that happens, sorry?
No, go on. You're right.
So once that happens, once the record company have found their successful band, then they start getting rid of the bands who weren't very successful.
Yeah.
So and then they find another template, and it's a business really. And sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not lucky.
Yeah. I read another interview where you quoted that Energy Orchard as being the best support band in the world.
Yeah.
Were you happy to wear that title, or were you harbouring niggling desires to step up and be the best headline act in the world?
Yeah, well, we wanted to be the biggest band in the world, at some point we did, but we always ended up supporting people like Van Morrison and Steve Earle, people like that. We always ended up doing big shows, big arenas, but we were the support act, and it never ever transferred to us being the headline. But we had a taste of it, and we did a lot of supports to big artists, so we had a real taste of the big time, but we didn't actually get there,
Yeah. Was there a defining moment when you knew it was time to put that band to rest?
Well, we'd been going for about, I suppose, by 1994, I think we had realised that we were just out of kilter with what was going on in the music industry. In England it was the Happy Mondays and the Stone Roses and people like that were coming through. And we had the Raggle Taggle wave was over, and we kind of realised that, and we had a choice of staying together and working in Germany most of the time because we were doing quite well there, or we'd call it a day. So we decided we'd call it a day, but nobody wanted to move to Germany.
So when the call came from Steve Earle with the offer of producing your first solo record, were you more than ready for that step forward in your career?
Well, yeah, it was. It was a good time, really. The band had Energy Orchard we had already agreed to split up, and we were just finishing off our kind of, we had a contractual obligation to make one more record, and Steve got in touch just when that was all going on. So I actually wrote enough material for two albums, which was lucky. So by the time that we did our last record, I had plenty of material, but I actually did write quite a lot of songs just before. Once Steve got in touch, I was quite excited by the idea of making that record. So once you get that inspiration, it made me write, and I wrote a lot of material, which most of the material on the album, the first album, Domestic Blues, I made with Steve, was all written just before we made the record. But I had lots of material.
You've certainly been blessed with support through the years from some very important musical names. Steve Earle, we've mentioned, Van Morrison, Mark Knopfler. Yeah. Those instances must have given you a great personal burst of confidence in yourself and your music. Yeah, it's great to have that sort of validation from people that you really respect. Every couple of years something bizarre happens, like Mark Knopfler will ring up and say, do you want to come to America and do some dates and let's make an album, things like that, and things like that have happened to me over the last 20 years. And I wouldn't be surprised something else happens. It just seems to be the way it's gone for me. It seems to be very, the people that I really respect. Yeah. Somehow or other, every once in a while I get one of those phone calls if somebody wants to work with me. But, so you never know what's around the corner. Is it difficult working in the studio with people like that, being a fan of theirs and having to put that aside, putting the fan side of you aside and look at them as a work colleague? Well, I have a sort of a philosophy about that. Sometimes it's very hard to work with a living legend, but they always come around in the end. Yeah. They get nervous at the start. But it just seems. Once you get past once you get past that someone is a world famous personality, musician,
at the end of the day, they started off like everybody else. They're songwriters. They love music too. You know, they're looking for music that they can listen to. And people, you know, anyone like Van Morrison. You know, Van Morrison's a huge music fan. He loves what he loves. You know, and he's always looking for something to turn him on, like any musician, really. So everyone is just the same. Once you get into the studio and you get past the initial thing, you know, you're just with another songwriter.
That's right. That makes perfect sense. How would you compare both Mark Knopfler and Steve Earle as producers? Did they both tackle the job of producing your work in a similar way?
Well, it was a different situation. You know, all these situations all tend to have their own kind of flavour. And Mark was really, really interested in the sound of the record, and we were, you know, really focused on how it was going to sound. With Steve Earle, that was just, you know, between takes, everybody was telling stories, and there was quite a lot of, you know, rock and roll stories, followed by, you know, a quick bang at the song sort of thing. So it was. It's supposed to. Steve Earle was a bit more ragged around the edges, you know. Mark was he's very. He really knows what he wants, and he doesn't stop until he gets it, you know.
Yeah. Very early in your solo career, you put out an album which saw you covering a bunch of Hank Williams songs.
Yeah.
I've seen you describe that as a labour of love more than anything else. So at the time, you weren't holding any great hopes or expectations. Was it a surprise when it was received as well as it was?
It really was. I mean, that was a real. I mean, I decided to make a record on the spur of the moment, and I paid the band with beer, and it was really supposed to be just a kind of. It was really just a sort of a mad experiment or something. You know, it wasn't really meant to be. I don't even think I was going to put it out. But when it was made very quickly, and everybody who heard it said, "This is, I really like this," and so I decided to stick it out, and you know, it's got great reviews everywhere. So
yeah.
You know, it's one of those strange things. There was no plan at all, except, and I was really, at the time, I'd really only just come around to Hank Williams. You know, really just decided this was my guy, and you know, that's why I made it.
Talk about your live performance. Have you found within yourself a feeling that your on-stage persona has changed a bit from your days fronting Energy Orchard to now your solo work?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should ask that. I actually saw a video of myself from years ago on YouTube, and I looked very angry. I don't know what was going on, but I looked really sort of like I was going to attack the audience or something, you know. Now I'm much more easygoing, and I tend to try to keep my gigs easygoing and you know and funny too. You know, I like a bit of laughter here and there.
Yeah.
You know, intentional laughter, you know. But I like people to come to a show and I feel like I've had a good time, good night out, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and good music and a bit of crack, as we say.
Yeah.
You know.
Talk about your songwriting. Are you one of those writers that is always on the go writing, or do you tend to just sit down and write when you've got a project in mind to work on?
It's a bit of everything, really. I mean, I've never really figured out. I seem to always be looking out for an idea. You know, I'll be always jotting down ideas and lines and things. But when it comes time to make a record, I really have to spend a couple of weeks really sitting down with the guitar and figuring out, you know, the format of the songs and the arrangements and you know, they go through various drafts. And that really is like work. But that's really only a few weeks before. I suppose it's pre-production more than anything. But most of the time, every day, I'll be thinking about songs. You know, it never stops, really.
Do you find there's a more productive time and place to write?
Well, it's always good to have your own space, really, you know, but you can do that anywhere. I mean, I've written songs in hotel rooms in different parts of the world. I've written songs in my where I live. You know, I've written a lot of songs in one of the rooms, you know. Just really, I've never really been worried about that. As long as I've got some space and a bit of peace and quiet and a guitar and a notebook and a pen, you know, or even a phone. A phone will do.
Yeah.
You know, pop away on that.
You moved back home to Belfast a few albums into your solo careers. The home environment, being home again, had an influence on your songwriting since you've returned?
Yeah, I think it must have. You know, I think you're always inspired or influenced by your environment, you know. And I lived in London for quite a long time, and as you know, it's a big, busy city. and we moved back here. I live up not far from the Belfast Loch. It's a big stretch of water, and it's very nice, and it's a really nice place to live, and it's very calm. So I think it's definitely. I think I can think more clearly, really.
You also set up your own label on your return home. Was that purely and simply a case of just wanting to take more control of your career and how your music was presented?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I've always been inspired by people like Van Morrison and Steve Earle, who always produced their own records. Van especially, he started producing his own records when he was in his early 20s and keeping control. And, he doesn't really have record deals. Even he does record deals with, he's the record company, but he deals with other record companies as well. So it's great to have that kind of autonomy. And then that means that you're not being interfered with. I mean, you make the record you want to make, really, and then you give it to the people who are going to hopefully take it a bit further for you. But yeah, I think it's good to have your own. Especially for me, it's good to have my own label.
Your How On album featured some songs pertaining to the Apollo space program, which I believe was a major interest of yours since your childhood. What is it about that program that's made it such a continued source of fascination for you?
Well, I was 7 years of age when they landed on the moon, and actually it was in July 1969 when Belfast was just about to enter into a really bad period of the Troubles. So there was a lot of things going on that summer, and amidst the sort of rioting, they were landing on the moon, and it was very. I remember being very kind of bamboozled by the whole thing, and it in the middle of all this terrible stuff that's happening in Belfast, this cosmic event was taking place as well. So it always stuck with me, and I've always been fascinated by the whole strangeness of that whole project. The idea of sending guys to the moon. I mean, it's bizarre, really. So I've always been fascinated by the technology and by the kind of people who made it happen. Yeah. Really inspired by the astronauts. They were very special kind of guys, and and I'm very interested in the cosmos. So it's just been a fascination and a source of musical inspiration too, which is it's great for songwriters are always trying to find something to write about that means something to them. Yeah, and that always means something to me.
Now you've got your wife Brenda playing in your band on bass. That must be a great feeling for you to be able to work and travel together. It must make life on the road a lot easier.
Yeah, it's great, because a lot of people end up in quite strained relationships because they have to go away. Musicians, they have to leave behind their partner in a lot of cases. And with us it's great. We sort of it's just an extension of our life. She plays the bass and does a bit of harmonies and does a lot of organisation. So she takes a lot of pressure off me, actually, because she organises things, So it's great. I mean, it really is. I mean, I prefer this way of doing things than being on my own and running around, and nobody to answer to.
Now, is there a style or a type of album or a concept of album out there that you haven't done yet that's still in your mind to do?
Well, I suppose, yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about. I mean, I've been writing, as I've said, I write a lot of the time. So the record always has to be. I'll try to make a record that has something about it that something other than just a collection of songs. So I've been listening to a lot of J.J. Cale lately. Oh yeah. And I really like the way he was able to use. I mean, he used a drum machine, in one of his first couple of records and some of the songs, and it's really good. It's not what you would think. So, and he's a really simple songwriter, but he's got this great thing. It's great simplicity, and I've been really inspired by his music of late. I've sort of come back to him again. And he's sort of, the idea of making a really simple record steeped in sort of blues and bluesy grooves, things like that. That's appealing to me. So maybe, you never know. I could be the next, a kind of using that as a sort of template.
The next direction. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And Bap, just before I let you go, upcoming plans. What's in your books for the rest of this year anyway?
Well, I got a couple of festivals coming up in July. I'll be going to Norway in July to do a festival, and I'll be doing some stuff in England. I think I'll be going to Holland again later in the year, and back to Norway. I seem to be getting quite a few gigs over there. But really, I'm just thinking about. I'm just taking my time before I make another record. You know, I want to really have a really strong bunch of songs and a good idea. And somewhere I might record it somewhere more exotic, maybe than Ireland. This the next time. So I'm just taking my time and thinking about the next record, really.
Fantastic. Hey, thanks for taking time out to chat to us today. I hope there's an Australian visit not too far down the track. We'd certainly love to see you down here.
Yeah, it'd be great. I'd love to go back. Yeah, indeed. Well, you never know.
Thanks for all the great music so far, Bap, and we're sure there's plenty more to come.
Thank you, John.
All the best. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.